Welcome everyone to this second video on Macbeth Act 3 Scene 2, focusing on the WJEC English Literature non-examination assessment. What we are going to focus on in this video is how does Lady Macbeth's character change from how she has been presented previously. And what I'm looking for is for everyone to understand what happens at the end of Act 3 Scene 2, to consider how Macbeth acts differently to how he acts in previous acts, and consider the changing relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. In the last video, we noticed how Lady Macbeth seemed to be having her own doubts, and she started thinking that she's actually lost something. While she was so preoccupied with what she could gain, she started to realise that amongst all of that, she has actually lost something too. And as you can see on your screen, she begins to try and help her partner. She tries to soothe him because she can see that he's wrapped with guilt. She can see that he's struggling with his thoughts. So she tries to remind him that he needs to be strong, reminds him that he needs to look a certain way. And what we see from Macbeth is that he does realise that he's got to put a certain face on. He's got to look a certain way. And he mentions Banquo. And he's mentioning Banquo because he's just sent those murderers to go and kill them, because he sees Banquo as a threat. Now, he doesn't tell his wife what he's done. What we see is that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are keeping things from each other. We see their estrangement. We see the beginnings of them seeming to fall apart. Lady Macbeth doesn't tell Macbeth about her doubts, and Macbeth doesn't tell Lady Macbeth about his actions, what he's decided to do moving forward. When we look at this next part, Lady Macbeth says, "You must leave this." And Macbeth responds with a very famous line. He says, "Oh, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. Thou know'st that Banquo and his fleance lives." Lady Macbeth responds with, "But in them nature's copies not etern." When Lady Macbeth says, "You must leave this," I think that sounds a little different to the way we've seen Lady Macbeth speak to her husband previously. Now, she is telling her husband, you must leave these thoughts in the past, you must move on from them. And there's a little bit of irony there, because Lady Macbeth has started to show that she's not able to leave those thoughts or those doubts in the past either. But she is imploring her husband to let go of these troubling thoughts. But notice how she doesn't come across as domineering or as forceful as she has in the past. She is telling him to do something, but she's not using the imperatives like she does much earlier in the play. Normally what Lady Macbeth does is uses those short, sharp phrases. Stop that, pick that up, use those daggers. Here, she's almost imploring. Perhaps Lady Macbeth has started to feel those kind of doubts herself and therefore isn't as hard on her husband as she was previously. Perhaps she realises that the husband is struggling and that she must be a little softer in her approach. But I think a little bit of a difference there between what we've seen from Lady Macbeth and what we see now. Macbeth's line, "Oh, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife." That exhalation of the word "oh" at the start, we can almost hear his pain. He's almost like an animal, and we can hear that sound that he makes, "oh." And that shows his troubled thoughts and the suffering that it causes. His mind is ill, his mind is in pain and in suffering. And we hear that through his language. And when he says, "full of my scorpions is my mind," I think the metaphor here is a very rich metaphor. Because first of all, we associate scorpions with poison and venom, something that will sting, something that is determined to kill. And a scorpion is armed with lots of weapons. So what we can consider is that his thoughts seem to be poisonous. All of these thoughts in his head are poisonous thoughts, and they keep stinging him. They offer him no relief. He can never think of anything else. It's like there's a scorpion in his mind that is constantly stinging his brain, and he gets no relief from that at all. It also shows that he's wounded. His mind is hurt, and he can find no reprieve at all. We can consider scorpions as something that infest a place, and that infestation is his mind, and their evil thoughts won't go away. We could also consider this to suggest that Macbeth is almost becoming a scorpion himself, a creature that lashes out blindly in the dark. It doesn't matter who he hurts, as long as if he is protected, like an animal who is trapped in a corner and will do anything it possibly can to protect itself. And that's the way Macbeth seems to be developing as a character. He then references, "Thou knowest that Banquo and Fleance lives." Again, his comments on Banquo and Fleance are creeping more and more into his language, and that's because he knows that they are a threat, and he can't ignore their presence any longer. Macbeth knows what the predictions were for Banquo, that he won't be king, but his sons will be king. That shows that Macbeth is focusing on anyone that could hurt him. He's realised that Banquo seems a little suspicious of him. What he's done is he's identified the threat, and now he knows exactly what he needs to do in order to vanquish that threat. I always think when it comes to Macbeth, he looks at the situation, he assesses it, and anyone standing in his way, he knows that they need to be removed. And in this case, he's going to remove them with force. He did it with Duncan, he now does it with Banquo and Fleance. But remember, he does not tell his wife that he's already solved that problem. He's already sent the murderers to kill Banquo and his son Fleance. And Lady Macbeth then returns with, "But in them nature's copies not return." And Lady Macbeth says they are not going to live forever. Banquo and Fleance will die one day. The dramatic irony here is that we know Macbeth has already sent murderers to kill Banquo and Fleance. So this reveals that she is no longer in control. She used to have all of the information and she would set out a plan. Now she knows less than the audience. It shows that she started to be kept from knowledge and therefore is in a much weaker position. He's keeping that vital information from her. Macbeth responds to that idea with, "There's comfort yet, they are assailable. Then be thou jocund, ere the bat hath flown his cloistered flight, ere to black Hecate's summons the shard-born beetle with his drowsy hums hath rung night's yawning peal. There shall be done a deed of dreadful note." Now Macbeth starts to hint that he's put a plan in place, that before the end of the night something will happen. But again, he does not tell his wife what he's done. At the start of this small speech, he says, "There's comfort yet, they are assailable." So they are assailable means that Banquo and Fleance are not protected from death, and that they are going to die. And notice the word comfort at the start. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are going to get comfort from the death of other people. And Macbeth and Lady Macbeth seem to be trapped now in a vicious circle, where the only way they can secure their power is by continuing to kill. Becoming king, the plan was kill Duncan. Now, to stay king, they must kill and kill and kill again. So they are assailable. Then be thou jocund. And I always feel like this is quite a disturbing idea from Macbeth. He believes his happiness, the word jocund can mean happiness here, he believes that happiness can only be found through more killing, and that comfort will come from more death. I think most of the audience will realise happiness will come from innocence. Happiness will come from not killing in the first place. But Macbeth is under the impression that by killing more, he'll be able to secure his position and therefore be happy. He then uses lots and lots of dark imagery in the next part. Ere the bat hath flown his cloistered flight. Well, here we've got the word bat, we've got the word cloistered, we've got black Hecate, we've got the shard-born beetle, we've got this drowsy humming, we've got the night's yawning peal. Lots and lots of dark imagery being used. If we focus on the word bat, the symbolism of a bat is that a bat is a blind hunter that kills in the darkness. Bats cannot see properly, but they are still lethal, they are still deadly. And we could link that idea of the bat to Macbeth. Macbeth is not seeing clearly, he's not acting with clarity. But what he is doing is he is striking out blindly to protect himself, much like this scorpion's image that we looked at previously. Bats are very adept at killing, but not so good at seeing what needs to be done. So perhaps here Macbeth has become blinded by his own desire to remain king. Ere the bat hath flown his cloistered flight, and here the word cloistered is showing that it needs to be enclosed and sheltered and needs to be kept secret. The imagery that we've got here is that Macbeth is the type of killer that now kills in the darkness, that murders in people's sleep, that send murderers to go and kill his best friend. Very different to the Macbeth we saw in Act 1, Scene 2, who would kill on the battlefield for the glory of his king. And then he says, ere to black Hecate's summons the shard-born beetle. He's going to act in the dead of night. And the idea of black Hecate, Hecate was the goddess of witchcraft and magic and nighttime and the moon, showing that Macbeth is focused now on acting in the shadows, killing in the darkness. And Macbeth has a choice. He could choose the light or he could choose the dark. When he decided to kill the king, he knew it was the wrong thing, and yet he chose to do those dark deeds instead of, wearing the clothes of his reputation, living in the light. And here Macbeth is continuing to choose the dark path. He's choosing more and more and more death, and that is only going to lead to greater suffering. And he summons the shard-born beetle. Again, imagine the imagery of a beetle, a dirty object, a dirty insect that scrabbles around in the dirt and you can't see it, and yet it does what it needs to do. And what he's describing was the shard-born beetle with his drowsy hums that wrung night's yawning peal. He's saying that before the end of the night, before the beetle makes this humming sound to tell everyone that it's nighttime, before the bat comes out of its hiding place, something is going to happen. And he refers to it as, there shall be done a deed of dreadful note. He uses the word deed. He does not tell his wife that that murder is going to take place. He knows that it's dreadful. He knows that it's an evil action. And he uses this alliteration, that constant D sound, done a deed of dreadful note. And that alliteration is heavy, almost giving a sinking feeling, almost like Macbeth is going to continue to descend and descend into more and more evil. And Macbeth's actions are going to continue to lead to more destruction. Lady Macbeth then asks, what's to be done? And consider how different this is to the Lady Macbeth we've seen in the past. Here it shows that she's lost control completely. In the past, she knew absolutely everything and she had to push her husband on to do what needed to be done. Now she does not have that information and she's got to ask her husband for the actual details. And it's almost like she's asking her husband for guidance too. Macbeth is in charge and Lady Macbeth becomes much more submissive. That is much different to how we've seen her earlier on in the play. She seems to have become much more dependent on her husband and now looks to him for the guidance that she used to give previously. Macbeth doesn't answer that question with details, but he does make reference to what's to be done. He says, be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed. Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day, and with thy bloody and invisible hand cancel and tear to pieces that great bond which keeps me pale. Light thickens, and the crow makes wing to the rooky wood. When he says be innocent of the knowledge, he does not tell her. He says, I want you to be innocent of what's going to happen. I'm not going to give you the details. I'm not going to divulge that information. And this shows that he is in control and she is submissive. She must now listen to him. He has made the decision not to tell her, and she's not going to question that. He does talk to her using the term dearest Chuck, which is a term of endearment. It does show, it's normally a statement that's shown to show love, and he did it previously with the word wife. However, that's a very hollow use of the term. Dearest Chuck is normally used from someone powerful to someone less powerful. And I think that shows that Macbeth has now taken the role of the man in the way that Lady Macbeth wanted him to. And now he sees Lady Macbeth as a slightly inferior character. He's in control, he's in charge, she is now weaker. And then he says, till thou applaud the deed. He thinks that Lady Macbeth is going to be proud of him for what he's done. because the decision to kill Banquo will hopefully lead to them both escaping any sort of jurisdiction. No one is going to challenge their authority because Macbeth is now dead. So he believes that this is going to make her proud of him. He then uses a piece of imagery around this idea of sealing. He says, "Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day." Now, the word sealing here is referring to a practice that used to happen in falconry 400 years ago. To seal a falcon, a type of bird of prey, is to blind the falcon in order to tame it. So you make sure that the falcon cannot see, and therefore it's much easier to tame. And what they used to do, which is rather gruesome, is they used to stitch up its eyes so that it couldn't see, so that it's blinded. And what this shows is that Macbeth is now calling for darkness, because he believes these actions that happen in secret will allow him and Lady Macbeth to live their lives without the fear that they've been feeling recently. And look how similar it is to the way Lady Macbeth was calling on night much earlier on in the play. Now Macbeth is calling for night because he's doing these evil deeds, and they must be done in secret, otherwise someone will realise that Macbeth has committed these atrocities. And that continues with the word scarf. The word scarf here also means to blind. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to get rid of all of the light so that nobody will discover these evil actions that he's doing. He says, "Scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day." He wants to escape the eyes in the sky. He wants to escape those eyes who will be able to see what he's done, and he's acting in the shadows, acting in the darkness. And he says, "And with thy bloody and invisible hand." The words bloody and invisible here show again that he's acting in the shadows. Nobody can see what he's doing. Nobody can find out what these actions that he's committing are. So he's trying to kill without anybody seeing it. And the reason why he employs murderers to kill Banquo instead of killing him himself, because if he kills him himself, somebody might discover that. Somebody might see what he's done. But by sending the murderers, he's sent these invisible killers, and nobody will know that it was him behind them. And he asks to cancel and tear to pieces that great bond which keeps me pale. I think that's quite violent imagery. That's quite visceral. You can imagine someone ripping up a piece of paper or something, it's being teared apart. And that violent imagery might be referring to his bond with Banquo. He's going to absolutely obliterate the bond he has to Banquo, but it can also be referred to him having a bond to the world, him having a bond to goodness, and he's going to rip up that bond completely. He will no longer be anything like a human being. He will no longer have any sort of humanity or innocence in his body. He's going to rip that relationship up completely, and that it will never return. Because the next part, which says, "which keeps me pale," what's keeping him pale at the moment is worry and fear. So by killing Banquo, he's also killing that makes him scared, that makes him worry. But also pale is that light imagery. Someone's skin is almost like a white colour. He's also going to destroy any possibility of him rejoining the light. And he's going to live the rest of his life in the darkness with these evil creatures. He then says light thickens, and that's an oxymoron, because I think we normally think of light as something that's full of air, something light. But here you've got that imagery of light being darkness. And when he's referring to this day that's approaching, because the light is coming out now, the next day is starting, and this is the day that Banquo was going to die, I think it shows that this day is going to be a very heavy and dark day. And the crow makes wing to the rooky wood. And here we've got more imagery of death, more omens of death. If you think of crows and rooks in the next line, those are both very dark birds, black birds that feast upon the weak, that feast upon dead bodies. And that's showing that he's already put this plan into place. These crows and rooks are already making their way to the wood. His plan is in action, and Macbeth is about to die. Nothing can stop it. Macbeth continues and then finishes off Act 3, Scene 2. He says, "Good things of day begin to droop and drowse, while night's black agents to their praise do rouse. Thou marvelst at my words, but hold thee still. Things bad begun make strong themselves by ill. So, prithee, go with me." You've probably noticed by now that Macbeth is the dominant force in this scene. He speaks far more than Lady Macbeth does, and that's different to what we've seen earlier on in the play. When he says good things of day begin to droop and drowse, we've got a juxtaposition between the evilness and then the goodness of day. And that juxtaposition shows that the goodness of day is dwindling. All of the good in the world is being killed off. Because Macbeth has acted against the divine right of kings, the world itself is falling apart. Because there is a natural order in Jacobean society. Everybody knows their place. The king is at the top. I'm here. My friend is there. Everybody knows the way the world is supposed to be. And with a strong king, with a good king, then the world is stable. Now that they've killed the good king, the whole world is becoming more and more less stable. And now what we see is that night and evil is going to prosper, and the good of days is being destroyed. So evil is destroying the daytime. And good things of day begin to droop and drowse. Think about the imagery of drooping and drowsing. Death is coming. You know, Macbeth has unleashed death upon the world. While night's black agents to their prayers do rouse. We've got this image of the night's black agents, which are the evil doers that he's sent out into the world. Those murderers, those evil beings, are on their way to kill the prey. And the word prey there makes Banquo and Fleance sound like they are animals, and that they are vulnerable and at the mercy of predators. And it's like Macbeth believes it's better to be predator than prey. I would rather be the killer than the person killed. And that's different to how Lady Macbeth was speaking at the start of this scene. At the start of this scene, she was saying she'd rather be the murdered person than the murderer. But Macbeth realizes that unless he acts, he is going to be the prey. Someone is going to challenge his authority. He then says, "Thou marvelst at my words." Lady Macbeth is looking at her husband, almost can't believe what he's saying. And then he says, "But hold thee still." Macbeth is asking Lady Macbeth to hold firm, be strong. You know, this is different to the way they were previously. There's been a role reversal. It used to be Lady Macbeth who had to tell Macbeth to be strong. Now it's the other way around. And then he makes this statement: "Things bad begun make strong themselves by ill." These bad beginnings make strong themselves by ill. What he's saying is that evil actions are necessary in order to gain. And they've made the bad beginning. They killed Duncan. But more evil actions are needed to keep what has been gained. So in order for them to secure their position, they must kill more. This is where that vicious cycle of more and more destruction to keep what they've got comes in. You'll notice that this is spoken in rhyming couplets: drowse and rouse, still and ill. Shakespeare often does this when a character is about to leave the stage. In this case, it gives us a very ominous feeling. Death is coming. Evil deeds are coming. And the words Macbeth are speaking are very heavy words, very dark words that we should all be scared of. Because this is a man who is becoming a tyrant. This is a man who believes that more death will lead to prosperity. And actually, more death is just going to make the world a more dangerous place. And then he says, "So prithee, go with me." He then tells his wife, "We are leaving. Come with me." So they leave together, just like they did in Act 2, Scene 2. However, it's a very different exit. This is the last time we see these two characters leave stage together. This time, they are much more fractured. There's much more distance between these characters. These characters have fundamentally changed in their relationship. And this is where we start to see them becoming more and more estranged from each other. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you now have a really good understanding of Act 3, Scene 2, and you can see that these two characters seem to be fractured, their marriage seems to be more and more estranged, and you can see this role reversal. Lady Macbeth, we start to see the doubts creeping into her mind, and we see Macbeth taking the dominant figure and almost asking for subservience from his wife. In the next video, we'll look at Act 5, but for now, I will speak to you later. Have an utterly delightful day. So long.